Dr. David Rodriguez had been working alone on the Neptune research station for 3 months when everything changed. The space station floated quietly in the darkness, far from Earth, surrounded by nothing but stars and the giant blue planet below. David was a scientist who studied alien life, though he had never actually found any. Until today. It started with a strange reading on his computer screen. Something big was coming toward the station, but it wasn't showing up on any of his sensors properly. David rubbed his tired eyes and looked again. The numbers didn't make sense. Whatever was out there seemed to be bending light around itself, like looking at something underwater. Then he saw it through the window. A ship unlike anything humans had ever built was gliding toward his station. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The hull looked like it was made of living crystal, shifting colors from deep purple to bright silver as it moved. David's hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication button, but before he could press it, the ship had already connected to his docking bay. The airlock hissed open, and David's heart nearly stopped. A figure stepped through that made him question everything he thought he knew about life in the universe. She was tall, much taller than any human, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Her features were elegant and otherworldly, with large eyes that sparkled like liquid starlight. When she moved, it was with a grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. "Please do not be afraid," she said in perfect English, her voice musical and warm. "I am Princess Lyrelay of the Andorian Empire. I come in peace." David stood frozen, his mouth hanging open like a fish. This couldn't be real. Aliens didn't just show up at research stations and speak perfect English. But there she was, real as anything, looking at him with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than any kind of threat. You can speak our language?" David finally managed to say, his voice cracking slightly. The princess smiled, and David felt his fear melting away despite himself. "I have been studying your people for many years through the signals you broadcast into space, your movies, your music, your books. I find human culture fascinating, especially your concepts of love and partnership." She walked around his small laboratory, examining his equipment with interest. David noticed she moved differently than humans, almost floating rather than walking. Her clothes seemed to be made of the same shifting material as her ship, changing colors with each step. "This is incredible," David said, following her around like a puppy. "You're the first contact with alien life that humanity has ever had. This will change everything." "Actually," Princess Lyrelay said, picking up one of his research samples and examining it with eyes that seemed to see more than human eyes could, "your people are not the first intelligent species we have encountered, but you are special, different from the others." "Different how?" David asked, genuinely curious now rather than terrified. The princess set down the sample carefully and turned to face him. "Most species we meet are focused only on power, on conquest, on expanding their territory. But humans, you create art for no purpose other than beauty. You help strangers who can give you nothing in return. You form bonds based on emotion, rather than just survival or benefit." David felt a strange pride hearing this from someone who had clearly seen much more of the universe than he had. "Is that unusual?" "Very unusual," she said softly. "On my world, relationships are arranged for political advantage. Marriages unite houses and settle disputes. Love, as you call it, is considered a luxury we cannot afford." There was something sad in her voice that made David's heart ache. Despite her incredible beauty and obvious power, she seemed lonely in a way he recognized. He had felt that same loneliness during his long months alone on the station. "That sounds awful," David said without thinking, then immediately worried he had offended her. But Princess Lyrelay laughed, a sound like silver bells. "It is awful. which is why I find your species so fascinating. Tell me, David Rodriguez, what is it like to choose your own path in life? David was surprised she knew his name, but then realized she probably had access to the station's computers. Well, I chose to become a scientist because I loved learning about life in the universe. I chose to come out here because I wanted to make discoveries that would help people understand we're not alone. And now you have, she said with another smile. Over the next few hours, Princess Lyrelay told David about her world. She described floating cities made of crystal and light, beings who could live for thousands of years, and art forms that existed in dimensions humans couldn't even perceive. In return, David showed her his research, explaining how he studied tiny organisms that lived in the ice of Neptune's moons. Your work is important, she said, genuinely impressed. You seek to understand life in all its forms. On my world, we have forgotten to look for life in small places. We only see grand gestures and large conquests. As the day turned to night, by the station's artificial schedule, David found himself more comfortable with the alien princess than he had been with another person in years. She listened to everything he said with complete attention, asked thoughtful questions, and shared stories of her own world that painted pictures in his mind of wonders beyond imagination. I should return to my ship, Princess Lyrelay said as David's computer chimed the late hour. My escort will be worried. You have an escort? David asked, suddenly remembering that this wasn't just a friendly visit, but potentially the most important diplomatic contact in human history. Yes, though. They do not know I came aboard your station alone. They think I am still conducting scans of your facility. She paused at the airlock door. May I return tomorrow? I would like to learn more about human customs. David nodded eagerly. Of course. I mean, if you want to. I'm not the most exciting person to spend time with. The princess looked at him with those starlight eyes, and for a moment David felt like she was seeing something in him that he didn't even know was there. I think you are more interesting than you know, David Rodriguez. Until tomorrow. As her ship departed, disappearing into the darkness as mysteriously as it had arrived, David stood at the window staring at the stars. Everything had changed in a single day. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and somehow he had become the bridge between two entirely different worlds. He couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Princess Lyrelay returned the next day just as she had promised. This time she brought a small device that looked like a glowing flower made of crystal. When she touched it, the air around them shimmered, and suddenly David could hear music, unlike anything he had ever experienced before. This is how we create art on my world, she explained, watching his amazed expression. The music exists in multiple dimensions at once. What you are hearing is only a small part of it. David closed his eyes and let the otherworldly melody wash over him. It made him think of sunrise over mountains he had never seen, of colors that had no names, of emotions he couldn't quite put into words. When it ended, he opened his eyes to find Princess Lyrelay watching him carefully. You felt it, she said with wonder in her voice. Most beings can only hear the surface layer, but you experienced the deeper harmonies. It was beautiful, David said, and meant it, but also sad somehow. It is a song about longing, she admitted, about wanting something you can never have. Over the following days, their meetings became a routine that David looked forward to more than anything else in his life. Princess Lyrelay would arrive each morning, and they would spend hours talking, sharing stories, and learning about each other's worlds. She told him about the floating crystal cities of her home planet, where buildings grew like living things and changed with the seasons. We live for thousands of your Earth years, she explained one day as they sat looking out at Neptune's swirling storms. But in all that time, we rarely form true connections with others. Everything is about duty, about maintaining the balance between the great houses, about political advantage. David found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He told her about his childhood dreams of exploring space, about the loneliness he felt even when surrounded by other scientists back on Earth, about his failed relationships that ended because he could never connect with people the way he wanted to. On your world, Princess Lyrale said thoughtfully, people choose their partners based on feelings, correct? On what you call love? Well, ideally, David said with a laugh. It doesn't always work out that way. But yes, we believe that people should be together because they care about each other, not because it benefits their families or careers. I have watched your movies and read your books about this concept, she said, but I always thought it was just fantasy, like your stories about magic or superheroes. Love is real, David assured her. Maybe not always the dramatic, perfect kind you see in movies, but the feeling of caring about someone else's happiness more than your own. That's definitely real. Princess Lyrale was quiet for a long moment. I envy your species this gift. Don't you have anything like it on your world? There are arrangements, she said carefully. I am promised to Prince Zephyr of House Vortex. Our union will end a war that has lasted for centuries and unite our two most powerful houses. It is considered a great honor. Something cold settled in David's stomach. Do you love him? I have met him only once, at a formal ceremony when we were both children. He seemed adequate, strong, intelligent, politically useful. She paused. But love, no. I do not think Prince Zephyr is capable of such feelings, nor am I expected to develop them. David wanted to say something, to tell her how wrong that was, but he held back. What right did he have to criticize the customs of an alien civilization? Still, the thought of this incredible, kind, curious being trapped in a loveless political arrangement made his heart ache. As the days passed, Princess Lyrale began helping David with his research. Her advanced knowledge and technology allowed them to discover things about Neptune's moons that would have taken him years to find on his own. They found complex microorganisms living in the deepest ice, creatures that existed in ways that challenged everything scientists thought they knew about life. You see life everywhere, she observed as they studied the samples together. Even in places where my people would see only empty rock and ice. Life finds a way, David said. It adapts, it survives, it grows in the most unlikely places. Like friendship between species that should have nothing in common? David looked at her, surprised by the question. Is that what we are? Friends? I do not know your word for what we are, Princess Lyrale admitted. On my world, we do not have relationships like this. You are not family, not a political ally, not someone seeking advantage from me. Yet I find myself thinking about our conversations when I return to my ship each night. I look forward to seeing you each day in a way I have never experienced before. That sounds like friendship to me, David said gently. And maybe something more. The moment the words left his mouth, David regretted them. What was he thinking? She was an alien princess, engaged to someone of her own kind, from a civilization so advanced that humans probably seemed like children to them. But Princess Lyrale didn't seem offended. Instead, she looked at him with those starlight eyes, and David felt his heart skip a beat. Something more, she repeated softly. In your culture, what would that mean? David swallowed hard. It would mean caring about someone in a special way, wanting to spend time with them, to share your thoughts and dreams with them, wanting them to be happy, even if it costs you something. And if two people feel this way about each other, then they might fall in love. Princess Lyrale was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I wish I had been born human, she said. I wish I could choose my own path, my own partner. my own happiness. David's heart pounded as he found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in his mind for days. If you could choose, what would you choose? She turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. I wish I could marry someone like you, David. Someone who sees beauty in small things, who cares about life in all its forms, who treats me like a person rather than a political prize. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them dared to cross. David felt as if the entire universe had shifted around them, as if this moment would change everything that came after. But before either of them could speak again, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. David's computer screen flashed, with urgent warnings. Ships were approaching, lots of them. Princess Lyraleigh's face went pale, her skin losing its beautiful glow. No, she whispered. They found me. Through the station's windows, David could see lights approaching in the darkness. Not the single elegant ship that brought Princess Lyraleigh, but an entire fleet of vessels that looked like weapons of war. Who found you? David asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Prince Zephyr, she said, her voice filled with dread. He has come to take me home. The warships surrounding David's research station were massive, each one easily 10 times larger than Princess Lyraleigh's elegant craft. They hung in space like predators circling their prey, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that made David's blood run cold. He had never seen anything so terrifying in his life. How did they find you? David asked, trying to keep his voice steady as more ships appeared on his sensors. Princess Lyraleigh's hands shook as she worked at her crystal device, her usual grace replaced by panic. I was supposed to conduct formal diplomatic meetings with your Earth government. Prince Zephyr must have been tracking my movements when I chose to spend time here instead. A new voice boomed through the station's communication system, speaking in a language that sounded like thunder and breaking glass. Princess Lyraleigh winced at every word. What is he saying? David asked. He is demanding that I come aboard his flagship immediately, she translated, her voice getting smaller with each word. He says I have embarrassed our people by fraternizing with a lower species. David felt anger surge through him at those words, but before he could respond, Princess Lyraleigh touched her device again. The voice now spoke in English, cold and commanding. Lyraleigh of House Starweaver, you will cease this childish behavior and return to your duties immediately. Every moment you delay costs lives in the war back home. A figure appeared on David's main screen, and David immediately understood why Princess Lyraleigh had seemed so reluctant to marry this being. Prince Zephyr was tall like her, but where she radiated warmth and curiosity, he seemed to be made of ice and sharp edges. His eyes were cold silver, and when he smiled, it reminded David of a shark. Greetings, human, Prince Zephyr said, looking directly at David through the screen. I am Prince Zephyr of House Vortex. You will release my bride to me at once. I'm not holding her prisoner, David said, finding courage he didn't know he had. She's here because she chose to be. Prince Zephyr's smile became even more unpleasant. Chose? How amusing. Lyraleigh does not choose anything. She has promised to me, and through our union, 2 great houses will be joined. Her personal feelings are irrelevant. Personal feelings are never irrelevant, David shot back. She's a living being with her own thoughts and desires, not a piece of property to be traded. The alien prince laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. How human of you. Your species is so young, so naive. You think feelings matter more than duty, than the greater good. Do you know how many of my people die each day while Lyraleigh plays? At being a diplomat? Princess Lyraleigh stepped forward, her composure returning slightly. The war continues because you profit from it, Zephyr. You have no intention of bringing real peace. Peace will come when we are united in marriage, Prince Zephyr replied smoothly. Our combined houses will have the strength to crush our enemies completely. That is how wars end, my dear bride. David felt sick listening to the way Prince Zephyr spoke about Princess Lyrelei like she was just another weapon in his arsenal. What if she doesn't want to marry you? Want? Prince Zephyr's eyes narrowed dangerously. What she wants is immaterial. She has duties, obligations. Her people need her to fulfill her purpose. Her purpose is whatever she chooses it to be, David said firmly. Where I come from, people have the right to make their own decisions about their lives. Where you come from, Prince Zephyr said, his voice dripping with contempt. People live for barely a century and accomplish nothing of lasting importance. Your entire civilization is a footnote in galactic history. David felt his face burning with anger, but Princess Lyrelei put a gentle hand on his arm. Do not let him provoke you, she whispered. That is what he wants. Prince Zephyr noticed the gesture, and his expression grew even colder. I see. The princess has developed feelings for the human. How disappointing. I had hoped the reports were exaggerated. What reports? Princess Lyrelei asked, though David could see she already knew the answer. Did you think I would not have? You watched? Your every conversation has been monitored, every moment recorded. Your confession of affection for this creature will provide amusing entertainment at our wedding feast. David felt his heart sink. Their private moments, their growing connection, their shared dreams, all of it had been violated, turned into something ugly by this awful being. You had no right, Princess Lyrelei said, her voice shaking with rage. I had every right, Prince Zephyr replied. You are mine, promised to me since childhood. Your father signed the contracts himself. Contracts can be broken, David said desperately. There must be some way. Silence, Prince Zephyr roared. You dare speak of our sacred laws? You who are barely more intelligent than the microbes you study? The insult stung, but David pressed on. If your laws are so sacred, why do you need an army to enforce them? For the first time, Prince Zephyr's calm facade cracked slightly. The army is here to ensure Lyrelei's safe return. Nothing more. The army is here because you know she doesn't want to go with you, David said, gaining confidence. If she truly wanted to marry you, you wouldn't need weapons to convince her. Enough, Prince Zephyr snarled. Lyrelei, you have 1 hour to return to my ship. If you do not comply, I will destroy this pathetic station and everyone on it, including your pet human. The screen went dark, leaving David and Princess Lyrelei alone in the sudden silence. Around them, the lights of the warships pulsed like angry eyes in the darkness. He means it, Princess Lyrelei said quietly. Zephyr does not make idle threats. David looked at her, this incredible being who had brought such light into his lonely existence. The thought of her trapped forever with that monster made him feel physically ill. There has to be another way, he said. There is no other way, she replied, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks like liquid silver. If I refuse, he will kill you and destroy this station. Then he will simply take me anyway. At least if I go willingly, you will live. I don't want to live if it means you have to sacrifice your happiness, David said, surprised by his own words. Princess Lyrelei looked at him with those beautiful starlight eyes, now bright with unshed tears. That is exactly why I wish I could marry someone like you, David. You would put my happiness before your own life. She walked to the airlock, her steps heavy with resignation. I must go, but I want you to know that these past days with you have been the happiest of my very long life. Wait, David said desperately. What if we could find a legal way to break the engagement? There must be some law, some tradition. There is nothing, Princess Lyrelei said sadly. Our laws are absolute. A royal engagement can only be broken by death or by—" She paused, a strange expression crossing her face. "By what?" David asked urgently. "By the right of challenge," she whispered. "But no, it is impossible. The trials would kill you." "What trials?" Princess Lyra shook her head. "It is an ancient law, rarely used. Any being can challenge a royal decree if they can prove their worth through trials of wisdom, courage, and sacrifice. But David, the trials are designed for our people. No human has ever attempted them." David felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "But it's possible? Legally possible?" "Legally, yes. But practically—" She looked at him with fear in her eyes. "The trials have killed Andorian warriors. What chance would a human have?" David thought about everything he had learned in his life as a scientist. He thought about the problems he had solved, the discoveries he had made, the determination that had brought him out here to the edge of the solar system. Most of all, he thought about Princess Lyra, trapped forever with someone who saw her as nothing more than a political tool. "I have to try," he said firmly. "If there's even a small chance of freeing you, I have to take it." Princess Lyra stared at him in amazement. "You would risk your life for me?" "I would risk everything for you," David said, and realized he meant every word. Outside the station, Prince Zephyr's ships waited like hungry wolves, ready to devour anyone who stood in their way. But for the first time since the fleet had arrived, David felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Princess Lyra had been gone for 3 months, and David felt like part of his soul had died. The research station seemed impossibly empty without her presence, without her musical laughter echoing through the corridors, without her curious questions about human customs and her fascinating stories about distant worlds. But she wasn't completely gone. Before leaving with Prince Zephyr's fleet, she had pressed a small crystal into David's hand. "This will let us speak across the stars," she had whispered. "No matter how far apart we are, we will still be connected." The crystal was no bigger than his thumb, but it glowed with a soft inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. When David held it close and concentrated, he could see glimpses of Princess Lyra's world, could hear her voice as clearly as if she were standing next to him. What he saw broke his heart every day. Through the crystal, David watched Princess Lyra go through the motions of royal life. He saw her attending formal ceremonies in flowing gowns that changed color with her mood, always showing the deep blue of sadness now. He watched her sit through endless meetings about wedding preparations, her face a mask of polite indifference, while inside she was screaming. "The ceremony will take place in 6 months," she told him one evening as he held the crystal in his small laboratory. Her voice sounded tired, defeated. "All the great houses will attend. It will be the grandest wedding in 1,000 years, they tell me." "How are you holding up?" David asked, wishing desperately he could reach through the crystal and hold her hand. "I am surviving," she said simply. "That is all any of us can do sometimes." David had been studying everything he could find about Andorian culture and law, using the crystal's connection to access their vast databases. What he discovered made him both hopeful and terrified. The right of challenge was real, but it was even more dangerous than Princess Lyra had described. "I've been researching the trials," he told her during one of their nightly conversations. "The trial of wisdom requires solving a problem that has stumped your greatest minds. The trial of courage involves facing your deepest fears made real. And the trial of sacrifice requires giving up what you value most," Princess Lyra finished sadly. "David, please do not think about this anymore. The trials have killed beings far stronger than humans. I cannot bear the thought of losing you too." But David couldn't stop thinking about it. Every night, he dreamed of Princess Lyra trapped, In a loveless marriage, her light slowly fading until she became as cold and cruel as Prince Zephyr. The thought was unbearable. During the day, he threw himself into his research with desperate energy. He studied not just Andorian law, but their history, their philosophy, their way of thinking. He learned about the ancient wars between the great houses, the complex web of alliances and betrayals that had shaped their civilization for thousands of years, and he began to see something that others had missed. "Lirale," he said excitedly during one of their conversations, "I think Prince Zephyr has been lying about the war." Through the crystal he could see her sitting in what looked like a garden made of living light, her face drawn with exhaustion. "What do you mean?" "I've been studying the historical records your crystal let me access. The war between your houses didn't start naturally. Someone has been manipulating both sides, keeping the conflict going for their own benefit." Princess Lirale sat up straighter, sudden interest replacing her weariness. "That is impossible. The war began over territorial disputes centuries ago." "Did it?" David pulled up the data he had compiled. "Look at this pattern. Every time peace talks were close to succeeding, something happened. A key negotiator would die in an accident, or evidence of treachery would surface, or a new weapon would appear to tip the balance. Someone has been sabotaging every attempt at peace. But who would benefit from an endless war? Someone who profits from selling weapons to both sides," David said grimly. "Someone who gains power from the chaos. Someone like Prince Zephyr." Princess Lirale was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking with rage. "If this is true, then thousands have died for his ambition. Millions have suffered while he played both sides against each other." "I think your marriage isn't about ending the war," David continued. "It's about giving him control of both houses so he can expand the conflict. He doesn't want peace, Lirale. He wants conquest." That night, Princess Lirale began her own investigation. Using her royal access to classified information, she uncovered the truth that David had suspected. Prince Zephyr's house had been secretly funding weapons for both sides of the conflict. He had orchestrated assassinations, sabotaged peace talks, and manipulated his own people into believing the war was necessary for survival. "You were right," she told David the next evening, her voice filled with cold fury. "Zephyr has been playing a game with millions of lives as the pieces, and now he wants to use our marriage to legitimize his rule over both houses." "We have to stop him," David said. "We?" Princess Lirale's image in the crystal flickered with what might have been hope. "David, even with this evidence, there is nothing I can do. Who would believe me? Zephyr has spent centuries building his reputation as a peacemaker. The High Council would have to listen if someone invoked the right of challenge," David said. "Quietly." "No," Princess Lirale said immediately. "I will not let you throw your life away for me." "And I won't let you throw your life away for a lie," David replied. "If Prince Zephyr succeeds, how many more will die in his wars of conquest? How many worlds will suffer under his rule?" David spent the next weeks preparing. He studied the trial records, learning what others had faced and how they had succeeded or failed. He practiced meditation techniques to strengthen his mind for the trial of courage. Most importantly, he worked on his solution to the trial of wisdom. The diplomatic puzzle that had stumped Andorian minds for generations was this: how to end a war where both sides believed they were fighting for survival, where trust had been broken so completely that peace seemed impossible. But David had an advantage that Andorian thinkers didn't have. He was human. He understood forgiveness, second chances, and the power of hope to overcome even the deepest hatred. His solution was radical, unprecedented, and just crazy enough that it might work. "I'm going to invoke the right of challenge," he told Princess Lirale 1 month before her wedding. "David, please." "I love you," he said simply. "Not just because you're beautiful or exotic or from another world. I love you because you're kind, curious, brave, and good. You see wonder in simple things and treat everyone with respect regardless of their status. You deserve to choose your own path in life. Princess Lyrelay was crying, her tears like liquid starlight in the crystal's glow. I love you too, she whispered, which is why I cannot let you do this. You can't stop me, David said gently. I've already sent my formal challenge to the High Council. By Andorian law, they have to hear it. You could die. I could, David agreed, but I could also succeed. And if I do, you'll be free to choose your own future. What if I choose you? David's heart leaped at the words, but he forced himself to stay calm. Then I would be the luckiest man in the universe. But the choice has to be yours, made freely, without pressure from me or anyone else. Through the crystal, he could see the hope beginning to return to Princess Lyrelay's eyes, the blue of sadness slowly shifting to the warm gold he remembered. When? She asked. Tomorrow, David said. I leave for your homeworld tomorrow. Then tonight, dream of me, Princess Lyrelay said softly. Dream of a future where love conquers all, where two different worlds can come together in peace. As David Yasij prepared for the journey that would either free the woman he loved or cost him his life, he held the crystal close to his heart and dreamed of starlight eyes and silver laughter, of floating cities and impossible love, of a tomorrow that might never come but was worth fighting for anyway. David had never seen anything as beautiful or terrifying as the Andorian homeworld. As his small transport ship approached the planet, he pressed his face to the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Floating cities of crystal and light drifted through clouds that sparkled with colors he had no names for. Rivers of pure energy flowed between the continents, carrying ships that moved like living things through the glowing currents. But David wasn't here as a tourist. He was here to fight for the woman he loved, and possibly to die trying. The capital city of Lumenspire hung suspended in the planet's upper atmosphere, its crystal spires reaching both up toward the stars and down toward the surface below. As David's ship docked at what looked like a platform made of solid light, he tried to calm his racing heart. Everything depended on the next few hours. Princess Lyrelay was waiting for him at the docking bay, surrounded by guards but still managing to look regal and beautiful, despite the worry in her starlight eyes. When she saw him, she ran forward before anyone could stop her, throwing her arms around him in an embrace that felt like coming home. You came, she whispered against his ear. I was so afraid you would change your mind. Never, David whispered, back. I told you I would risk everything for you. The High Council is assembled, one of the guards announced in heavily accented English. The human challenger will present himself immediately. As they walked through corridors that seemed to be carved from living rainbow, Princess Lyrelay quickly explained what would happen. The trial of wisdom comes first. You will be presented with the great problem that has puzzled our philosophers for generations. If you fail, the trials end and you... She couldn't finish the sentence. And I die, David said calmly. I understand. If you succeed, you face the trial of courage, where your deepest fears become real. Many warriors have broken there, choosing death over facing what terrifies them most. And the final trial? The trial of sacrifice, Princess Lyrelay said softly. You must give up what you value most to save what you love best. It is said to be the cruelest trial of all. They entered a vast chamber where beings of incredible beauty and power sat in judgment. The High Council of the Andorian Empire looked like living artwork, each member unique, but all sharing that otherworldly grace that made David feel clumsy and small. Prince Zephyr stood to one side, his cold silver eyes fixed on David with undisguised hatred. So the pet human thinks he can challenge ancient law, he sneered. This should be amusing. The High Counselor, an ancient being whose skin seemed to contain entire galaxies, spoke in a voice like distant thunder. David Rodriguez of Earth, you have invoked the right of challenge. Do you understand that failure means death? I understand, David said, surprised that his voice stayed steady. Then let the trial of wisdom begin. The chamber around them shifted and changed, becoming a three-dimensional map of the Andorian Empire and its enemies. Holographic displays showed the positions of fleets, the locations of battles, the complex web of alliances and betrayals that had kept the war burning for centuries. For 800 years, the High Counselor announced, our greatest minds have sought a solution to this conflict. Both sides believe they fight for survival. Both sides have legitimate grievances. Both sides refuse to trust the other. How would you end this war, human? David took a deep breath and stepped forward. This was the moment everything depended on. All his research, all his understanding of both Andorian and human nature came down to this. The war continues because both sides believe they must win or die, David began. But what if winning and losing weren't the only options? What if both sides could get what they really need without destroying each other? He gestured to the display, highlighting key points. The real problem isn't the original territorial dispute. It's the fear and hatred that 8 centuries of war have created. You can't solve that with treaties or surrenders. You can only solve it by giving both sides something more valuable than victory. And what would that be? The High Counselor asked. Hope, David said simply. Hope for their children. Hope for a better future. Hope that there's more to life than fighting and dying. David outlined his plan. Instead of one side defeating the other, both groups would join together to explore and colonize new worlds. The energy and resources spent on war would be redirected toward discovery and creation. Former enemies would become partners in building something greater than either could achieve alone. The galaxy is vast, David said, his voice growing stronger with each word. There are countless worlds to explore, wonders to discover, problems to solve together. Why spend your lives destroying what others have built when you could spend them creating something new? The council murmured among themselves in their musical language. Prince Zephyr looked furious, but David could see doubt creeping into the eyes of others. Your solution has merit, the High Counselor said finally, but it requires trust between groups that have been enemies for centuries. How would you build such trust? The same way you build any relationship, David replied. One small step at a time. Start with joint scientific missions. Share knowledge about healing and growing food. Let the children of both sides learn together. Trust isn't built in a day, but it can be built. The trial of wisdom is complete, the High Counselor announced. You have passed. David felt his knees go weak with relief, but there was no time to celebrate. The chamber shifted again, becoming a dark place filled with shadows and whispers. The trial of courage begins now. The High Counselor's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Face your deepest fears, human. Show us if you have the strength to overcome them. The shadows took shape around David, becoming his worst nightmares made real. He saw himself failing Princess Lyra Lay, saw her trapped forever in a loveless marriage while he died uselessly. He saw his own inadequacy, his fear that he wasn't smart enough, strong enough, good enough for someone as incredible as her. But as the fears pressed in around him, David remembered something Princess Lyra Lay had told him weeks ago. Courage isn't the absence of fear, she had said. It's doing what's right despite being afraid. David stood straight and faced each fear in turn. Yes, he might fail. Yes, he might not be good enough. Yes, he was just one small human against forces beyond his understanding. But he was here anyway, fighting for love and freedom and the right to choose. I am afraid, he said aloud to the shadows. But I'm here anyway. My fears don't control me. The shadows dissolved like smoke, and David found himself back in the council chamber. Several of the council members looked impressed. Prince Zephyr looked concerned for the first time. The trial of courage is complete, the High Counselor said. You have passed. Now comes the final trial, the one that has broken the strongest hearts. The trial of sacrifice. Princess Lyrelay stepped forward, and David's heart clenched at the tears in her eyes. To complete the trials, the High Counselor explained, you must sacrifice what you value most to save what you love best. Choose, human, your life or hers. David stared in confusion. I don't understand. Prince Zephyr has offered a bargain, the High Counselor continued. He will release Princess Lyrelay from their engagement if you take her place as his prisoner. You will spend the rest of your short human life in captivity, but she will be free to choose her own path. David looked at Princess Lyrelay, saw the desperate hope and terror warring in her expression. Then he looked at Prince Zephyr, who was smiling that cold, cruel smile. This was it. The choice he had known was coming from the moment he decided to invoke the right of challenge. I accept, David said without hesitation. David, no! Princess Lyrelay cried out, but David held up his hand. Wait, he said, a new understanding dawning. I think I've been looking at this wrong. He turned to face the High Council. The trial asks me to sacrifice what I value most to save what I love best. But what I value most and what I love best are the same thing. Princess Lyrelay's happiness and freedom to choose. David took a deep breath. I sacrifice my claim to her. I give up any right to expect her love in return for what I've done. She must be free to choose her own path, even if that path doesn't include me. True love isn't about possession. It's about wanting someone to be happy, even if their happiness doesn't include you. The chamber fell silent. Prince Zephyr's smile faltered. But, David continued, I won't sacrifice myself to a tyrant who will use my death to control her. That wouldn't save what I love. It would destroy it. The High Counselor leaned forward. Explain. Prince Zephyr doesn't want Princess Lyrelay, David said, everything finally clicking into place. He wants the power that comes with marrying her. If he has to let her go, he'll just find another way to get that power. My imprisonment won't save her. It will just give him time to plan his next move. David pulled out the evidence he and Princess Lyrelay had gathered about Prince Zephyr's war profiteering. The real sacrifice this trial demands is the sacrifice of silence. I sacrifice my safety to speak the truth about this man's crimes. As David presented the evidence of Prince Zephyr's manipulation of the war, his secret weapon deals, his sabotage, of peace talks, the council's expressions grew darker and darker. These are lies, Prince Zephyr shouted, but his voice lacked conviction.